Hi, I'm Patty Holland with Corporate Health and Wellness Association, and we are very grateful to have Pooja Madden with us to discuss corporate mindfulness related to COVID-19. Uh, Pooja is the founder of Mindfulness Map, and she is an award-winning leadership coach and consultant. We're very lucky to have her with us. Originally from India, Pooja brings over 15 years of experience in business leadership and mindfulness to spark the full potential of leaders and organizations. So I'm going to turn this over just directly to Pooja so she can help us get a good understanding of what employers um, are going through, what they can do to assist their employees, and also for employees to know what the employers are going through to try to help them. So Pooja, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Patty. Before I start, I want to just bring my watch over so I can keep a track of the time. I thought I would be able to see it on here, but thank you. So welcome, everyone. Today's training is focused on on mindful corporate communications in a time that is extremely unprecedented for everybody. I just want to say that none of us have any living memory of going through something that changes so drastically from one day to another. There is so much uncertainty and so much unknowingness at this time. And uh, there are, in terms of us as employers and leaders, there are many things right now that we can absolutely not control. We cannot control who gets infected. We cannot control how many people get infected. We cannot control how long this lasts. And there are certain things that we can, in fact, control. And one of those things is how intentionally and consciously we communicate during a time when everybody is dealing with intense amounts of anxiety and stress and uncertainty. So this will be the focus of our training today. And what I would like for us to start with is to consider 2 points. At one point, we have this crisis, right, where there is a lot of fear and anxiety and uncertainty. And then the other point is some capacity to provide relief, to provide a sense of stability. And the bridge between those 2 points is communication. And the more intentional, conscious, and mindful that we can be in all aspects of our communication, the easier it becomes for us to deal with, as employers and as leaders, to deal with all that is coming up for us, our employees, our clients and customers and patients, for our partners, and for everybody involved in the supply chain part of it, our stakeholders across the board. And so I would like for us to look at what we are going to cover today. And um, great. So here are the main things that we are going to look at today. One of them is, what is one of the most important aspects of communication when things are changing on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, and how leaders and employers can be aware of this aspect as they make decisions, very hard decisions in very short periods of time, how they can be aware of this aspect as they communicate. We will also look at the role of mindfulness and the power of mindfulness techniques at a time where our natural instinct is to step into fear or fight or flight mode, and how do we activate our parasympathetic nervous system that brings us to a place of calm and focused and resilience, so that the decisions we make and the communication that we share is coming from a more calm and focused space. Then we're going to look at the 3 filters of communication during this time that create, like I said, a sense of trust, some sense of relief, some sense of stability, and confidence in teams and customers. And we will look at the different buckets of communication as well that employers and leaders should be looking at this time if they have not done so already. Then we're going to talk about the other aspect of communication, which is hearing and active listening. And we will discuss a framework on how we can help to manage our own stress levels, of course, but also all the chaos that is unfolding right now as people are working from home, all the stress of having kids at home and having to homeschool them. Or how do we manage not just the stress and anxieties of all these changes at work, but also everything that is unfolding for us personally and at home. And then we're going to talk about in a new environment where we cannot pop into the office for clarification. There is no water cooler conversations. Everybody is in silos. How do we understand the different ways that our team members can feel appreciated so that they can come every day to work with a sense of productivity and motivation and engagement. All right, so before we do that, I would love for us to look at what has changed for us and how our priorities are different in terms of communication, but also in terms of business strategy as we look at the changing nature of COVID-19. So before we look at this, let's look at the last 10 or 12 years. Employers, leaders, business owners have been focused on growth. What that means is that we have looked at team engagement, we have looked at wellness initiatives, we have looked at diversity and inclusion initiatives, we have looked at all kinds of development and growth initiatives that would create a culture that is very attractive, that would create business operations that are primed for growth. And now we find ourselves in a very new, unprecedented environment where our focus is all the way at the bottom. This is the reverse hierarchy of priorities in a pandemic. And if you look at what most of us are needing to focus on as employers, one of them is our crisis response. What is the window over the next 1 to 14 days, and what is the most urgent issues that need to be addressed in that time? Many states are going into lockdown, and so there is a 14-day or 2-week or 3-week lockdown, and all business operations have shut down. What does this mean as companies scramble quickly to transition to remote work? They scramble to make some very hard decisions around laying people off or furloughing employees. All of that falls in the bottom of the pyramid of crisis response. Then we're looking at survival. With everything that has changed and continues to change, and everything that in the economy is shifting, we need to also then focus on how to stay financially solvent over the next 6+ months. And this is again a piece that many employers are looking at right now on how to stay afloat in the next 6 months as the situation changes from one moment to another. So there's a lot of financial solvency concerns that are being addressed by employers. Then we have some possibility of looking at a recovery phase. And what does this mean for us in the long run? In the next 6 months to 2 years, how are operations going to change? Many organizations will have to look at managing remote teams going forward because as some experts will say, the strands of coronavirus will remain in amongst us. And so as vaccinations are being designed and as new systems are being looked at, we will have to consider operations, whether they have to do with sanitation and hygiene policies and all kinds of different wellness processes that need to be put in place so that we can, after this spike is over, how can we maintain the safety of our employees and our customers in the long run? And then finally, we get to explore the growth and the vision phase of this on what are new product offerings, what are new um, profit opportunities or just ways of revenue streams that would need to be explored, and how companies will need to innovate to then sustain their profitability and thrive in this new era. A couple of things about this phase. There have been organizations that have used the crises and the survival mode to really pivot into interesting new business models. For example, American Airlines is now a freight airline. So while they have lost all their passenger clients, right, they have now chosen, with everybody engaging in e-commerce as they're in lockdown, they are looking at being a freight carrier for the next, 6 months or so. And so this is kind of where organizations will need to focus in their growth phase on, like, what does this new post-pandemic era require us to focus on? All right, so I would invite you to take a moment right now and look at where your organization and what are the communication priorities for your organization right now. Are you still in crisis response mode? Are you in survival mode and looking at the next 6 months? For most of us in the United States, we are very much in the crisis response mode, where we are looking at a communication plan for the next 1 to 14 days. All right, so let's talk about the communication aspects of this. This is the most important thing that if we can take anything from this training, this is probably the most important aspect of dealing with crisis as an employer and as a leader, and that is this concept of emotional contagion. Now, in psychology, there is this concept of emotional contagion, which says that we are constantly regulating and infecting each other with our emotional and mental and physiological states. So an example of this is when women live together, their menstrual cycle starts to sync up and align and orient itself to the collective. And that is the power of this contagion, which means that an entire physiological function reorients and realigns itself to match everybody else's. And this is what we are dealing with right now. So currently, the number of people infected or tested and infected with the coronavirus is in about 500,000 people. That's a really big number. But you know what is an even bigger number? The number of people who are currently infected with fear and anxiety runs into the millions, if not the billions. And so this is where our power, all the things I was talking about that we can control our emotional contagion. And as employers, we must, in fact, take extra care to understand and master our emotional contagion even before an act of communication has taken place. Because if we show up with stress and anxiety and a sense of overwhelm, immediately it's going to trickle over to everybody that we communicate with. And so that is where the role of mindfulness and meditation comes into play. When Harvard Business School and other researchers have studied the brain, they have determined that really we have two brains inside one. One is our brain, which is an older brain, more primitive brain, that is mostly the amygdala, what we also call the lizard brain. And let's call them, for the sake of simplicity, let's call this brain the primitive brain for now. The primitive brain is reactive. It reacts without thinking or considering any consequence. It also reacts very quickly. Like the time that it reacts in is very quick. And this is what we typically call the fight or the flight or the freeze response. The primitive brain tends to tilt away from everything. It tends to tilt away from ideas and opportunities. It tends to tilt away from people. And so when we talk about inclusion and diversity, this is the kind of brain that prevents, that activates bias and things like that. And also the emotional contagion of the primitive brain is of fear and anxiety and stress and sometimes even anger. Then we have the other side of the brain, not the other side, but the same brain. It's actually here, the prefrontal cortex, which is a much newer part of the brain that has developed over time as we are not having to sort of fight, be in life-threatening situations so much anymore. And this part of the brain always verifies if danger is real first before it responds. So it's not reactive, it's responsive, and then it will weigh options and plans for the future before it makes any decisions. And again, this part of the brain, which we will call the ambassador, tilts towards people and opportunities and new ideas, and it almost has like a beginner's mind, which is looking at situations from openness and curiosity rather than trepidation and fear. And then finally, the emotional contagion of this part of the brain is collaboration, it is compassion, it is focus. And so Harvard Business Review tells us that even 10 minutes of meditation can change which part of the brain is activated. So as you can see in this diagram over here, the yellow, white, orange, red, and pink parts of the brain are the amygdala. And that is a brain under stress. And then 10 minutes of more, even deeper breathing, not any kind of special meditation, will deactivate those parts of the brain that do not serve us right now, that activate our calm and focused and resilient state within our own self. And so I would invite you in this moment to just take a minute to check in with yourself on two things. What is your emotional contagion? If you had to put a label on what is the emotional state that you are carrying right now, what would it be? And there's no judgment here. We're all dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety. And then whether you are breathing from the chest or from your stomach. And just these two inquiries can help you pivot out of this old primitive brain and into a more collaborative ambassador-like brain. And so let's do a few cycles of deeper, longer breathing all the way into the stomach. So you can either count till 4 as you breathe in and breathe out, or you can imagine a box and breathe along with it. So you breathe up and then pause and breathe down and then pause again. And this is a technique that Navy SEALs and veterans use to deal with very challenging, very stressful situations where they have to make decisions very, very quickly. Wonderful. So staying with this longer, more intentional style of breathing, and I want to just mention that this is a perfect tool for you to embrace as you are engaging with your teams, because there is so much stress both at work and at home. And so if you can begin your Zoom meetings or your phone conversations by inviting everybody to pause for a minute, take a pause for the cause, and then take 3 cycles of longer and deeper breaths, and that will change the entire emotional contagion of your team in under 30 seconds, in under 1 minute. And so I encourage you and invite you to explore how you can do this for yourself on an ongoing basis, as well as how you can make yourself available for your team members and encourage them to practice this, so that a lot of their stress and anxiety is being managed and elevated through this collective intention that you are participating in together. All right, so all of this is the internal aspect of our well-being and our mental and emotional state, so that we can show up for our teams, for our clients in the most holistic and a stable way as possible. And now we will talk about the external piece of this, which is the actual communication. So when we are looking at communication, we want to look at our communication from three main perspectives. And of course, it depends on what role you have. You could just be managing a team, or you could have a client-facing role, or you could be, being an intermediary as well. And so whatever your role is, you're looking at communication with your team, your employees. You're looking at communication with your customers, your clients, and your patients. And then you're looking at communication with all stakeholders. If your company is public, then there are investors, there are board members, there are supply chain partners, there are other partners. So you want to bucket your communication in those three categories. And what we want to do is we want to look at how we want to make sure that our communication is being filtered through three main filters. One of them is being consistent and proactive in communication. What does this mean? How employers communicate now will really determine so many things. How we are remembered as a brand and as an organization and the values we stand for, but also how quickly we were able to bring relief and a sense of stability to those who are important and valuable and meaningful relationships for us. And so when we're talking about proactive communication, we're really looking at a couple of different things. If you have a client-facing business, look at what kind of communication needs to go out so that patients or clients and customers know that you have their back. A couple of examples of this is, if you have offices or a physical space or a warehouse, having what are the new policies that have been put in place to make sure that these spaces are clean, they're being sanitized, are there new hand sanitizing stations, how are the employees stepping into work, are they practicing social distancing, how are they being taken care of, are they getting childcare, are they just receiving wellness kind of support. Think of any and all the things that you are doing and you're probably taking for granted that you would like your clients to know at this time. So being very proactive from that perspective, if there are staggered shifts that your employees are now taking so that nobody's in the office for long periods of time. Are you taking their temperatures every day to make sure that anybody who's infected is not let into the premises? Are they, like I said, are they receiving pay? Who is working from home? What can they expect at this time? Is there telemedicine now in your clinic or in your facility? Just starting with being very, very proactive in your communication of what is being done as an employer and as a leader, as an organization, by you to protect your employees as well as your customers. The other aspect of being proactive with this is when it comes to our employees themselves, right? So some of you are having to make very difficult decisions around laying off and furloughing your employees. All of them, I'm guessing, are mostly working remotely now. So being proactive in what to expect over the next 1 to 14 days, like we talked about the crisis plan, is one of the biggest gifts of relief that you can give to anybody right now. And that brings us to the next piece of the communication, and that filter is of clarity. How much clarity can you make sure is in all your communication, whether it is on the phone or it's email or social media? People are so frazzled and overwhelmed and stressed that clear, conscious communication helps them activate their parasympathetic nervous system. It helps them activate their ambassador part of the brain. So providing that kind of clarity, like I said, with all the steps that are being taken, what can they expect next, If your services are online, what is the expectation? What is your customer support looking like? What is the best way for them to communicate? If you don't want them to walk through the door of your office or your store, then what is the best way that someone who needs your help, if you're a medical facility or a medical product provider, what can they expect from you at this time? If you are furloughing and laying off employees, it is absolutely crucial to be very clear about what this means. If they are continuing to get healthcare benefits, what does this mean for them for applying for unemployment benefits? So you want to be as clear and think a few steps ahead for what might be coming for them if they're being laid off or furloughed, and how can you alleviate some of their challenges and stressors at this time. And that brings us to the final filter here, is of compassion. Like I said, this is what a lot of people will remember us for, is what is the legacy that this leader or this employee left because they were engaging in a certain way. And so putting ourselves with the lens of empathy and then communicating, if we are laying off people, we want to let them know it was not their fault, that you did the best that you could, that they were some of the best people that you worked with, that you hope that they can be safe at this time. This is not just a human issue. This is also, from a very strategic perspective, it is expensive to hire people later on, so you want everybody to feel like they're still part of something and they feel connected, that you still have their back, even if you're making the hard choice to furlough them. All right, so let's talk about the next piece of this, which is the listening piece. A lot of healing and relief is made possible when we are able to show up with compassion and with presence. And so I want to share with you more about the HEAR framework, which is a way of being a very active listener at this time when many people are not feeling heard, they're not feeling seen, and they are confused and they are stressed. So the first thing we want to do is we want to pause everything and really bring our full presence and our full attention, even if it is in a text or an email or in a phone conversation, to be fully present with this person that we are communicating with, or who is communicating some of their stress to us. We want to engage, and the way we engage, again, is by practicing longer, deeper breathing. We want to receive this communication without getting triggered ourselves, without that letting, activate some of our own thoughts. We want to receive it with no judgments and nothing that could bother, our sense of being able to hold space for who we are listening to. Then we want to ask for any clarification. We don't want to assume anything. We don't want to fill in the gaps. We want to remain open, and we want to ask if there is anything that you did not understand fully. You want to ask for that clarification. And then finally, you want to be able to reflect back and recap what you heard. And if you are able to give this gift of active listening and following the HEAR framework to your employees, to your customers, you will be surprised at how few people are doing this, because everybody is stressed, everybody's minds are active and in overdrive, and nobody is really able to hear each other. And so being able to do that and giving that gift is a very, very powerful, meaningful, compassionate act of service that you can consciously make right now. And then finally, we want to talk about appreciation. Like I said, now that we are transitioning to many new methodologies of working, the platforms have changed, we are working remotely, everybody is in silos. And a lot of what used to be possible before, you could pop your head in and get some clarification on something into an office. After a meeting, you could clarify certain things, or you could congratulate someone on that great presentation, or you could meet at the water cooler. There were so many opportunities of connecting and working with your team members at a time when there was physical intimacy, and now there is physical distance. So it really helps to understand how each of your team members likes to be appreciated so that they can feel motivated and engaged at a time when so much is stressful for them. They have kids at home, they have to homeschool their children, they have partners who are also probably working at home. And so there is just a lot of chaos at this time. And how can you provide them forms of communication and appreciation that really hit the spot and that get them back to feeling engaged and focused on the task at hand? And so the book actually offers an assessment, and I would invite you to pass this assessment on to your team members and say, I want to understand how you would like to be appreciated, so take this assessment. But if you've had a relationship with them for a while, you know which ones work for whom. So let's go through them very. So the first one is, of course, words of affirmation. Some of your team members will need to hear from you that they did a great job at this talk, or their report was wonderful, or just anything, even if it's a short text, it's a small email. Words of affirmation, showering them with appreciation and using words to let them know that what they are doing is good, to give them grace, is very, very meaningful for some kind of people. Quality time. This is the perfect time to double down on your one-on-one time with your team members. It sounds counterintuitive because you are busy, but the more time that you're able to spend with those team members who crave quality time, you will be surprised at how much ownership they are able to take, and they can work with autonomy and a lot of self-guidance and self-motivation. Finally, we have acts of service. Acts of service refers to doing little things for some team members for whom this is important, like helping them out with a project, or passing on a resource that might help them, or making a connection at a time when someone can help them. Just making some acts of service so that they know that you are tuned in to their struggles and their challenges, and that you are able to show up for them through these small acts of service. And then we have receiving gifts. This is challenging at this time. Gift cards, or even physical, like a note of thanks, is a really good idea at this time. I also want to say that the fifth language here is actually physical touch for those employees who like a tap on the shoulder, or a handshake, or a hug. Of course, none of that is possible right now, so we're not going to talk about that. Okay, so let's recap what we discussed. We talked about the power of our emotional contagion and what we want to infect our employers, our customers, and our clients with, and how this is the most crucial thing that as an employer that you can be aware of. Then we talked about how we can shift and pivot to a more productive emotional contagion that is of service to us and to others by practicing mindfulness, even if it is for short periods of time. If you are in a leadership position, I highly recommend setting up some time before you start your work every day for this. There are also apps like Calm and Headspace that you can just plug in and practice some mindfulness on a daily basis, and also encouraging your team members to do this so you can all collectively move to a mentally healthy place and manage each other's stress and anxiety. The three filters of being proactive, clear, and compassionate in your communication. The HEAR framework to address concerns so that you can really be present and mindful in your listening, and the 4 different languages of appreciation and how you can use that to manage productivity and maintain productivity and motivation in the workplace right now. Thank you.